You are listening to Radio Free Signs of the Times, broadcasting to the world on the eve of destruction.
We are doomed to extinction because of agriculture. We have raped and pillaged this planet. There is a disinformation program literally for everyone, no matter who you are and what your interests are, what your beliefs are, which way you're focusing. There is a website set up just for you to take you in and to vector your thinking and your attention into the way that they want you to think. Categories for things happening in the sky and the cosmos. If you read the scientific reports that come through and put the pieces together, you can see something big is happening.
Hello and welcome to Sott Talk Radio. Today is January 27, 2013, and the title of tonight's show is Gun Control USA. Do Guns Protect Civil Liberties? I'm your host, Niall Bradley, and my co-host, Joe Quinn.
Hi.
And with us tonight, we have a special guest, Jason Martin. Jason, say hi.
Hi, Jason.
Jason is with us tonight. You may have noticed he had an article on Sott.net about this very topic we'll be talking about tonight.
No, I didn't. They forced me to write it. They held a gun to my head. They're a whole bunch of gun nuts.
No, but seriously, you should check out the article if you get a chance on Sott.net. It's right at the top of the page. You can check it out after the show for a little more information in case we missed out something that Jason covered in his article. But first of all, let's do some introductions, because Jason needs to tell us just who he is and why we have dragged him onto the show here this evening.
I don't know. I mean, I like to consider myself a God-loving and veteran Republican gun nut. Okay. And not really, I mean, I'm a programmer. I'm a sort of a lifelong student of martial arts and strategy and combat and violence. And when I was very young, one of my mother's friends was a 6th degree black belt in ninjutsu. Of course, I was 6 years old at the time, and
everybody loves ninjas.
And everybody loves ninjas, So I was like, will you teach me ninjutsu? And he was like, yeah, okay. So he kind of Mr. Miyagi'd me a little bit. He never actually taught me how to throw a punch or anything. It was all a bunch of the mystical stuff. But I was kind of hooked in martial arts, and so throughout my life, I've studied various ones. Isshin-ryu karate, Wing Chun, Walloon Kung Fu, and Aikido. I spent a lot of time studying Aikido and Tai Chi, and right now I do a lot of Kali harness and things like that. And I'm kind of into the Dog Brothers, and they're very much into sort of like theories of law enforcement and correctional enforcement and things like that. And they talk a lot about violent crime in the streets and dealing with that, self-defense. So that's where my particular expertise in that department would come from, is, I spent a lot of time studying the various different self-defense mechanisms, studying guns, empty hand, knife fighting, knife defense, things like that. So, I mean, that's where I come from a certain perspective.
Well, that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about tonight. It's self-defense, the right to self-defense, the right to bear arms. Yeah. And the reason we're talking about this is anyone who's listened to the show from last week knows that we discussed pretty much in depth the Sandy Hook massacre. And apart from obviously producing a massacre and a lot of dead children and people, the one major thing that the Sandy Hook massacre produced on a national level within the US was a major debate that's still ongoing about guns and the idea of gun control, and whether or not some new laws are required to control guns, particularly assault rifles, for example, as a result of Sandy Hook, in an effort to prevent it or stop such things happening again.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, gun control is high on the agenda, and what you notice is that no distinction is made between mass shootings, such as what we discussed last week with Sandy Hook, and of course there were several other horrific shootings before that. There's no distinction made between these kinds of outrages and the background, let's say, regular homicide rates in the U.S. You would never hear gun control be put to the top of the agenda in the mainstream media unless something horrific had happened. Mm-hmm. So these mass shootings provide, there's like a pretext there, or whatever you want to call it, gun control is top of the agenda.
Obviously, we have this problem when we talk about gun control, where we're actually talking about a very complex topic that isn't a cause and effect type situation. Yeah. It's not it's not so cause and effect. So what you have in modern Western society, in fact, most societies, is you have this kind of you have push-button legislation. They're like people are like rat in a cage, pushing a button, hoping to get the treat out. And the way that they do this is they think that they can legislate safety. They think that law prevents crime, and they've been doing this for like 10,000 years. Easily 1,000 years on the books. They keep making laws to be safer, and they're never safer. Never. And it never works.
Never?
It never works, because laws don't prevent crime, they punish crime. Law attempts to be a deterrent for crime, but, a murder has been a capital offense for years, and yet people still do it. So obviously it doesn't work as a deterrent, right? Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have laws. On the contrary, we should have laws. But we should understand that when we make a law for safety, right, that we are deluding ourselves because it doesn't work. Laws don't prevent them. They punish them. They give us a way to pursue a criminal after the crime has been committed. Mm-hmm. And what a lot of people, especially like the gun lobby, are trying to argue is that they want to they think that they have found a way to help them to prevent crimes in the act by being armed,
Yeah.
So a large part of the debate is based on this fallacious reasoning of gun control will lead to less crime, right? Which is false.
And make you safer.
And make you safer by that. Now, of course, there is this problem of, you get a lot of talk from both sides, right? But they're usually kind of actually arguing a little bit different points, you see? Because the people who want the gun control, they want less gun crime, right? But what they're actually arguing for is less shooting incidents, right? And the other guys, the gun lobby, is actually arguing for the opposite. They want more shooting instances and less of other types of crime. They want less robbery, less rape. They want less physical assaults, right? And the other people are saying, well, because they don't understand guns, they don't carry guns, they're kind of very pacifist, Fabianist type of individuals, wait for the police to come, this type of idea, right? They don't understand guns, and to them, their only experience of guns is in the media. They see Rambo, he's got an M60, so that's how they look at any kind of gun-toting. Any person who has a gun, they imagine he's Rambo, and he's got this big, giant chain gun blowing away hundreds of people. That's their only real experience with guns. They don't shoot them, they don't own them, right? And they think that shooting is the worst thing. It's the worst thing. And then when you get one of these Sandy Hook kind of incidents, they see that it can be very bad. It is horrible for children to get shot. But it's just as horrible for children to get stabbed, and it's just as horrible for children to die from infectious diseases or to drown in pools. There's all these other situations that children are dying that we also need to be looking at, that the worst offender of child deaths is infectious disease from lack of health care. The second one is actually drowning. It's kind of interesting that in the United States, more children drown in residential pools than are killed by guns. That doesn't mean that we should ban pools, but it also doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking at gun violence in schools, because obviously gun violence in schools is completely unacceptable in every sense of the word. I mean, violence in schools is unacceptable. And the thing is that they think that banning a gun is going to end violence in schools, and they're not really aware of the fact that, okay, first of all, in countries that have very strict gun laws, there are still crimes in schools. There are still shootings in schools. They're much reduced in the shooting aspect, because when you ban guns or when you legislate guns heavily, it reduces shooting crime. That's obvious. This is a logical conclusion. Less guns means less people getting shot. By guns, because there aren't any. But unfortunately, what it ends up doing, and it is very true, and it's very much proven, is that the crime that was shooting now gets spread out into all the other crimes, because a large amount of shooting crimes can or should be attributed to kind of self-defense shootings and things like this, But you don't really have statistics of those things. It's very difficult to find accurate statistics. It's not difficult to find somebody claiming they have them. Hold on a second.
What about the argument, though, that, I mean, there's obviously a lethality with guns that you don't find with other weapons, or an ease of, maybe not ease of use, but
that's
lethality.
not entirely true. It's not entirely true. Guns are not substantially more lethal than any other type of weapon. I mean, I think it's you have a 3 in 4 chance of dying from a knife wound, and you have a 1 in 4 chance of dying from a single gunshot. But of course, in these cases, you have multiple gunshots, and they're in a tight, closed room with a bunch of kids.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're talking about a lethal situation.
What about the idea that guns in some way are easier to use?
Of course.
Than say knives. I mean, you take the average.
No. A knife is eminently concealable. A knife requires no bullets, no gunpowder, no registration. You can make it in the back of your house. You can make it out of a screwdriver. In fact, I think it's here in France. A lot of the gypsies, one of the things they're doing is carrying around screwdrivers that have had the tip sharpened even more, and using those as shivs against people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, the knife is one of the deadliest and one of the most facile weapons. And seeing the results of knife crime. If people who were talking about this whole gun violence stuff were to see, what it looks like when somebody has been sliced and stabbed 20, 30 times from a knife fight, they would really be like, whoa, this is messed up. I mean, arguing the little details, the little gradations between, well, it's a little bit more dangerous here or there, is not really pertinent, because violence should be the unacceptable thing,
mm-hmm.
not the particular type of violence, not how it finds its expression, because whether or not that expression is raping women, robbing homeowners, stabbing people, or shooting kids in schools, that expression of violence has to be seen as unacceptable, and people should be trying to find out, how can we deal with the violence?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the suggestions is, let's ban the guns, or let's legislate the guns, or control the guns, let's do background checks. This doesn't work,
it's not a bad idea, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's some ulterior motive or some conspiracy behind this for the government, for example, to take away your guns.
The government does not want to
take
away
your
your guns. The government does not want to take away your guns. I mean, only very stupid, insecure governments want to take away guns.
Mm-hmm.
Guns, small countries that are very, very insecure in themselves want to take away guns because they're not very progressive in their political thinking. The American political elite are not stupid people, and they realize and recognize that the size and technical skill of their paramilitary police and the institutions of the government are so armed in such an inordinate. I mean, there's such a disparity between the arms that are even accessible to the population and the arms that are accessible to the government, that the government has absolutely nothing to fear with you even owning an AR-15 Bushmaster. They don't have anything to fear if you owned M60s. I mean, really, they don't. The government doesn't. Perhaps other people would, but the government in and of itself doesn't. I mean, when the guys in Waco, Texas, they were stockpiling guns. The ATF said, you can't do this. What did they do?
They sent in tanks, yeah.
They sent in the tanks and the FBI. I mean, Branch Davidians didn't have a chance. Forgetting whatever their religious or political opinions were, I don't care about that. I'm just talking about, these people who come up and say, we're going to resist the government, and no, you're not. I mean, in 1776, you could resist the government because you didn't have such a wide range of military hardware, and considering that you have today. I mean, but today, in order for you to resist the government, you would have to have M16s and cruise missiles in your backyard and service to air missile batteries, maybe a couple of,
Predator drones.
You'd have to have your own army, basically.
You'd have to have your own army, and even then, you wouldn't be guaranteed success because of the nature of modern warfare, which people don't study at all. They don't think about. They think that they're going to do a revolution, and all they're going to do is get themselves and other people killed. I mean, most of the people who would suffer from an attempted revolution would be regular, civilian, everyday Joes.